There's a reason some people look at a car and see transportation, while others see identity. Psychology suggests that for many adults, especially between their late teens and mid-40s, modifying a car isn't really about horsepower, paint, or sound systems. It's about authorship. Imagine someone standing in a quiet garage late at night, adjusting a detail no one else may even notice. The world sees a vehicle. They see a statement, a reflection, a signature. And what's fascinating is that this impulse tends to show up strongest in people who value individuality, autonomy, and quiet self-definition. Car modification can look flashy from the outside: custom rims, lifted suspension, tinted windows, subtle engine tuning. But underneath, it often reflects something psychologically meaningful: the desire to personalize space in a world that feels standardized. Most cars roll off assembly lines identical to thousands of others. Modifying one transforms it from mass-produced to intentional, from generic to chosen. And psychology often notes that when people personalize objects, they strengthen their emotional connection to them. It becomes more than ownership. It becomes extension. For some, that extension represents competence. For others, creativity. For others still, control. Especially in environments where work feels repetitive or life feels structured, shaping a vehicle can feel like reclaiming authorship. Society sometimes reduces car culture to stereotypes: reckless, attention-seeking, superficial. But that framing often overlooks the deeper psychological pattern at play. Many individuals who modify cars aren't chasing validation. They're chasing resonance. They want something in their external world to mirror their internal taste, precision, and values. And that impulse to shape your environment, so it reflects who you are, is profoundly human. This conversation isn't about glorifying extreme behavior or making sweeping claims. Not everyone who modifies a car shares the same motivations. But psychology suggests there are recurring themes: identity signaling, sensory engagement, mastery, belonging. If you've ever felt a quiet satisfaction after upgrading something small, even if no one else noticed, you already understand part of it. The hidden psychology behind car modifications isn't about machines. It's about meaning. And once you start looking at it through that lens, it becomes less about engines and more about one of the most overlooked psychological drivers behind car modifications is something researchers often describe as identity signaling. Humans naturally communicate who they are through subtle environmental cues, clothing, music taste, workspace setup, even the phone case they choose. A car, especially in the United States, where driving is woven into daily life, becomes one of the most visible personal extensions of identity. Psychology suggests that when someone modifies their vehicle, they may be shaping how they're perceived, but not necessarily for approval. Often, it's about alignment. When the external world matches internal preference, there's a quiet sense of coherence. Lowered suspension might reflect precision and performance focus. A lifted truck might express resilience and freedom. A meticulously restored vintage car can signal appreciation for craftsmanship and history. These choices often communicate values before words are ever spoken. Another important concept is perceived control. In a world where careers, social expectations, and economic pressures can feel unpredictable, modifying a car offers a contained environment where outcomes feel tangible. You research a part, install it, test it, feel the difference. Psychology suggests that hands-on customization can strengthen a sense of agency. The feeling that your decisions create real change. That sense of agency is deeply stabilizing for many adults navigating modern life. There's also the sensory dimension. Engine sound, steering feedback, the feel of acceleration. These experiences engage the body, not just the mind. Studies in behavioral science often suggest that immersive sensory experiences can increase emotional presence. When someone invests in performance or aesthetic upgrades, they may be enhancing that embodied experience, turning routine commutes into intentional moments. And then, there's belonging. Car communities, whether local meetups, online forums, or casual friendships, often provide structured social connection. Psychology suggests shared passion lowers social barriers. It gives conversation a foundation. For introverted or thoughtful personalities, this can create connection without forced small talk. The car becomes a bridge. Importantly, not every modification is about status or showing off. In fact, many enthusiasts appreciate details only other enthusiasts would notice. That subtle recognition reinforces competence and shared language within a niche group. It's less about broad applause and more about mutual understanding. When viewed through this lens, car modification begins to look less like impulsivity and more like curated self-expression shaped by identity, control, sensory engagement, and community. And that understanding opens the door to something deeper about why personalization feels so psychologically satisfying in the first place. There's another layer that often goes unspoken, the psychology of mastery. Research in motivational science frequently suggests that humans are deeply wired to pursue competence. We don't just want to own things. We want to understand them, improve them, refine them. Car modification, for many, becomes a structured pathway into that sense of mastery. You start by learning something small, how suspension geometry works, how airflow affects performance, how aesthetics influence perception, and over time, knowledge compounds. What began as curiosity becomes skill, and skill builds quiet confidence. This isn't about ego. It's about earned familiarity. There's a distinct satisfaction that comes from hearing an engine. You tuned yourself or seeing a detail. You installed with precision. Psychology often notes that when effort and outcome are clearly connected, the brain tends to register a deeper sense of accomplishment. Unlike abstract achievements that may take years to materialize, vehicle modifications can offer visible, tangible progress. That feedback loop, effort, adjustment, improvement, can feel grounding in a fast-paced, digital world where results are often delayed or intangible. There's also the element of narrative building. Humans make sense of their lives through stories. A modified car can become part of that story. This was the project I built during a transitional year. This was the car I learned patience with. This was the phase where I discovered my style. The vehicle becomes a timestamp, a marker of personal evolution. And interestingly, psychology suggests that attaching meaning to projects increases long-term emotional value. It's not just metal and rubber anymore, it's memory. Another subtle factor is aesthetic control. In environments where much of life feels algorithm-driven or standardized, designing something unique reintroduces choice. Even small visual changes, a wrap, custom lighting, interior upgrades, create a sense of authorship. For detail-oriented personalities, this level of control can feel deeply regulating. It transforms passive consumption into active creation. And finally, there's the quiet, meditative quality. Many enthusiasts describe working on their cars as calming. Focus narrows. Distractions fade. The mind enters a flow state, a term psychologists use to describe full immersion in an activity. In that space, time feels different. Pressure softens. It's not escape in a negative sense, it's intentional engagement. When you step back and view it this way, car modification begins to reflect deeper human themes: growth, narrative, competence, focus. It becomes less about the object and more about the process of shaping something with your own hands. And in doing so, subtly shaping yourself. When you step back and look at the bigger picture, the hidden psychology behind car modifications often reveals something surprisingly human: the desire to leave fingerprints on your own life. Psychology suggests that people feel most grounded when they experience alignment between who they are internally and what they express externally. A modified car can become one of those alignment points, not because it defines you, but because it reflects you. And reflection creates coherence. In a culture that moves quickly, where trends shift overnight and digital identities are constantly curated, working on something physical, mechanical, and real can feel stabilizing. There's weight to it, texture, resistance. You tighten a bolt and feel the tension. You adjust the setting and notice the response. That cause and effect relationship can restore a sense of clarity that abstract modern life sometimes lacks. Society may occasionally misinterpret car modification as attention-seeking or excessive. But psychology often reminds us that self-expression is rarely that simple. For many, it's not about being louder. It's about being more precise. It's about crafting something that feels authentic rather than default. And authenticity tends to be deeply regulating. It reduces the subtle friction that happens when you feel unseen or misaligned. If you've ever felt that quiet pride when someone notices a detail you carefully chose, not because you needed approval, but because they understood it, then you've experienced the relational side of personalization. Shared recognition strengthens connection. And connection, even around something mechanical, fulfills a core human need for belonging. None of this suggests that modifying a car is necessary for identity. It's simply one avenue among many. But it illustrates a broader truth. Humans are meaning makers. We imprint ourselves on spaces, objects, routines. We adjust, refine, personalize, not just to stand out, but to feel integrated. There's something quietly powerful about choosing how your environment reflects you rather than passively accepting what's given. And in that choice, there's self-respect. Not rebellion, not ego, just authorship. So if this perspective resonates, maybe it's less about the car itself and more about what it represents. The desire to create, to master, to belong, to align. And if exploring the psychology behind every day, passions helps you see your own behaviors with more clarity and curiosity, you're welcome to continue that exploration here. Not because you need validation, but because understanding yourself a little more deeply is always a meaningful drive forward.